everybody. Welcome back. David and Tim Robertson from the Financial Center. Once again, to just go over our State of the Markets edition this year for 2025. That's just the time where we get together and kind of look back over the last year or so and see what went well and maybe what didn't, and then look out to the future to 2025. Kind of look to see what the landscape looks at and what kind of things we might expect for the year. So sit back and relax. This is also the point where we get to look at the strategist and see who forecasted what and how correct they were over the last year. So here in front of you, you get to see the Tim and I and all of our disclosures. That's for our compliance department, and this, of course, are opinions that Tim and I may have, not investing advice, and forecasts are simply that, forecasts. So with that said, let's take a look at our chart that all of you have seen over the years, and that is our S&P year-over-year declines. You've all seen this. We went through this multiple times in my office, and it simply talks about or points out that markets are unpredictable. And every year on that chart from 1980 all the way through last year, you can see that every single year that we've had the market go down at some point during the year. We talked about this, and if you go back and if you can look at the chart and zoom in here on 1980, you remember back the good old days where we were. And if you started out with $100,000 and you put it into the S&P 500, which is our chart, I pointed out that you're going to look at your statement. If you did that January 1st, you will look at your statement somewhere in 1980 and look and say, oh my gosh, I am down. I lost 17% of my money. And at that point, you're going to have a choice to make, because you're going to do one of two things. You're going to say, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I'm going to sell because everything on the media, on the TV and the radio and all my friends say it's the end of the world and I should sell. Or you could do, as Tim and I have coached you to do, which is to say, Dave and Tim told us this was going to happen, and all we need to do is be patient. Well, if you did the latter instead of the former in that example, on December 31st of 1980, you would have once again looked at your statement and saw, oh my gosh, I finished up 26% for the year. Hot dog. Now, every single year you get the opportunity to go through and to have that same thought process, because as you look at the chart, every single year markets go down. Now, that being said, if you look up at the top over those years, of 45 years, 34 of them have finished in the positive. That's a pretty good record. In fact, that's 75% success or winning percentage. I don't know how many of you are sports fans, but if you're a sports fan, 75% is a pretty good indication that you're having a good season. And in the S&P, that's normal, but you have to be patient in order to get there, in order to win. And we're going to talk about that later. All right, here you take a look at the S&P and values and how we measure that. We measure that by using PEs, or price to earnings ratio. You can see from the chart that values, or what you pay for a stock, tends to go up in value and down historically. Obviously, the goal is to buy low, okay, and sell high. Easy to say, but hard to do. Where are valuations today? Well, we've seen markets have two back-to-back 20% years. I pointed that out in one of my videos, that these are good times. Could we have another? Of course. But let's look at where valuations are. We have some companies in the S&P 500 that have huge valuations, which means there's about 8 companies, the Magnificent Seven, companies that are just at historical astronomical prices. You pay a lot to buy those stocks. Well, if there's 7 out of 500 that have outsized valuation, that also means that there are 493 stocks or companies that have great valuations that you have the opportunity to buy low. These valuations today, as you can see from our chart, valuations are still a little bit high because of those big ones at the top. Could they go higher? Absolutely. Can they also come down, valuations? Certainly. But what we want to point out here is one of the things that the managers that we work with, that Tim and I select for you to run your portfolios, what they're looking to do is to sell some of those ones at valuations that are at their tippy tops, knowing that they might not stay there forever, and looking to buy some of those ones down here at the bottom, some of those value stocks, knowing that in the future, this happens. So that's called rebalancing, and that's what we do. As we look at that, let's take a look at some of the good things that are happening. Okay, these are earnings per share, or profitability measurement of companies. I've talked to you in the past about earnings are the mother's milk of the market. Earnings, are companies profitable? Are they making money? Well, in this case, you can see from the chart that company earnings have gone up for the last 20 years. A couple exceptions in there. 08, they slipped down, but they've gone back up. Let's look at 2020, okay, or when we saw valuations because of COVID come down. Look what happened after that. Valuations or company earnings bounced way back. And 2024, we can see the earnings were higher than 23. And in 2025, the projection is that they will be higher still, as well as 2026. So these are analysts that are projecting earnings are going to go higher. And when earnings go higher, that also helps to propel markets to higher heights. Is that going to happen for sure? Well, I mentioned again on January of 2020, we had no idea what COVID was or what it could do. So markets are unknowable, but certainly this bodes well for the future. What's next? You can see that what are the components of growth in the economy? Well, number one, you can see from our example in the powder blue, the consumer is healthy. Consumer is 68% of the economy. And you're going to see here in a little bit that the consumer is quite healthy. Why? Look, we went through COVID where a lot of people got money, okay, and they spent it, and that pushed prices higher, caused inflation. Today, people are still in good shape, spending less, which is a little bit of a good thing, but the consumer still drives 68% of our economy, and that's a good thing, with business right behind. Now, you can see from this chart, and that is that the consumer, even though their finances, they're in good shape. Household debt is down. We as consumers are feeling really good about ourselves. Why? Because Homes have increased. We feel wealthy because our homes are worth more. Our stock accounts, our 401ks, our assets have increased a whole bunch over the last 5 years. People are feeling good. And for the most part, debt is still under control. In fact, if you look at the chart, you see that household debt is below where it was way back in 1980. We are historically still have low debt. And when people don't have a lot of debt, that's good. They have the ability to spend, which keeps the consumer healthy, which keeps the economy going, which again bodes well for many things. Delinquencies, they're starting to come back up a little bit after COVID when we paid everything down because people had money. But you can see that still student loans are way down and mortgage defaults way down. And partly mortgage defaults are down because so many people refinanced at such great rates that they can afford to pay their homes off. And that generally is the biggest ticket for people. Once again, bodes well for the economy moving forward for 2025. The federal debt. Unfortunately, the federal finances have not done quite as well as some of the consumers with their finances. We all know that the federal deficit is at historic highs. What they're going to do about it, yet nobody's really addressing that. But history, if it's any guide, there's two schools of thought here with this crazy debt situation that we have. And quite simply, we are spending more money than we are taking in. The government is the only business that can get away with that you can spend more than you have coming in. And it needs to change. However, 2 times in history that I can recall where we've had this. Once, World War II. We blew up the debt because we needed to finance a war. Okay, makes sense. What happened after that? Soldiers came back. We stimulated the economy. People had babies. They built houses. We grew our way out of that. Great. Second time, Reagan administration. For most of us that can recall, he took over and we had a huge debt problem once again. And if you can recall, some of the things that he said was, we've got to shrink government or give government back to the people. We've got to spend less and make government smaller. Shrunk down the size of government. It reduced taxes, which stimulated the economy and spurned 20 years of growth after that. What happens this time? Unknowable. We'll have to just stay tuned to see how things shake out, okay? But certainly something to keep an eye on for the federal government. Here we take a look at inflation. Inflation has been on everybody's mind for the last 5 years or so. Yep, after COVID, people had all kinds of money. When you give people money, they spend, they do what people do, buy stuff. And when there's more buyers than there are sellers, prices go up. You know the story. You can see that back in June of 22, when we saw inflation peak at 9%. In order to fight this inflation, the government was forced to increase interest rates. And we talked about this on our videos. It was the medicine that needed to be given to the patient in order to fix it, or the chemotherapy to kill the cancer. It wasn't pleasant, but I told you if you stuck around that it would pass. Well, government did that, increased interest rates. Markets went down because they didn't like that. But as a result, also inflation came down and markets came back up. Now, here we are to speak. And I said on our videos when Tim and I would talk about this, that if you're patient, in 2 years, we'll see that 2 to 3% inflation again. Here we are. We're at about 2.7% as of end of last year, a tidbit higher as we speak today. But inflation back down to that whole 2 to 3% level. Not quite to the 2% that the Fed is looking for in their goal, but we're getting there. We're headed in the right direction. Again, positive for the economy. Now, inflation, people have said, well, but inflation's going to come roaring back because of all this talk about tariffs. And tariffs are inflationary, or can be inflationary. You see in front of you a chart of tariffs in this country dating all the way back to the 30s. Yeah. Tariffs have come way down in this country. Free trade is good. Tariffs, not necessarily good for free trade. But the current administration has talked about tariffs and putting tariffs on. Okay. I would say, is that a negotiating tool? Or is it real? Don't know. We'll see. But if history is any guide to us, if you can see around the Trump 1.0, we saw the Trump or the tariffs or the threat of tariffs. We saw some actual tariffs increase, but it wasn't enormous, and markets still prospered under those circumstances. What do we see this time? Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out. But the tariffs have come down, and even if they go up a little bit, that is not a deal killer for the economy. So we shall see. Here's a great thing for the economy as well. Unemployment. People are working. We have historically low unemployment, which is great because people are working, they have money. When they have money, they spend. And when people spend, corporations make profits. And profits, if you're the owner of the company, you own those stocks, you get to profit also by share prices or dividends going up. It's all good. Unemployment, as you can see from the chart, historically low at our 4%. But what's really good about this slide is that we've seen wage growth start to come back up. Unemployment's low and wages have come back up a little bit. Those are good things, again, for the economy. And this doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon with unemployment jumping up. No, it looks like we're in a nice golden time where people have jobs and work. Another elephant or in the room is interest rates. What will happen with interest rates? Well, I told you back in 2022 that when interest rates were going up, that was going to be a headwind for the economy and for the markets. And it turned out to be correct. And I told you that in 2023 and 24, with interest rates coming down, that would be a tailwind. Turned out to be a very nice tailwind. Now we've got to a point where the Fed, their goal, they want to continue to decrease interest rates. And the reason they want to do that, because they are the biggest interest payer on all that debt that we talked about earlier, and they'd like to have less interest payments, as we as taxpayers want also less of our money going to pay interest on that federal debt. So they'd like to see interest rates come down, and they've telegraphed to the markets that they want to see interest rates come down. But you also have that thing about inflation. If inflation starts to come back, they will not be able to decrease interest rates as much as they'd like. In fact, there is a possibility that later on in the year, if we see inflation come back, that they might have to increase interest rates. Now, as small of a thing as this we're talking about here with interest rates, the Fed wanting to bring them down to a long term of 3%, what happens in the meantime could add to volatility in the stock market. In fact, as I speak right here, if we do have a little bit of a tick up inflation later on this year, and the Fed has to increase interest rates, I promise you that markets will react in a negative way to that little hiccup. But I also suggest to you that if that happens, that each and every one of you might want to use that as an opportunity to send money in to add to your accounts, because I believe that would be a great time or to add, or a great buying opportunity, because I think that would be a short-term hiccup. But we'll see. Just like all the other things that we talk about, we will get to see how this plays out. Here's a great chart that I love, and this is consumer confidence. Well, one of the greatest investors of our time, Sir John Templeton, said that you want to buy when there's blood in the streets. Put another way, as Warren Buffett has said, is be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. Now, the way to put that is when everybody else is happy and things are great, might be a time to sell. That's what our chart here looks at. And that is simply consumer confidence. When people are feeling good, markets don't always do great after that. When people are feeling terrible and it's the end of the world, that's a great time to buy, because others are usually selling. Let's go back just for a little example. November of 2008, markets were down. You remember what it was like. GM had declared bankruptcy. Lehman Brothers was gone. Bear Stearns was on the ropes. AIG, you know the story. It was the end of the world. The Dow was at 6,000 and change. 6,000 during that time. Yep, and it was the end. It was never going to be the same. People said that we were in for 20 plus years of malaise where the market would not go anywhere. How wrong were they? Because, as you can see from the chart, okay, from there until the next bump, markets went up 20-some% until 2011. Brexit. Markets went down again. It was bad. And this is not the market that you're seeing. This is consumer confidence and how people felt. Okay, but after that August, markets went up a whole bunch. And then we get to look at 2020, April. You saw from the 33 days where markets went down 33% in about 10 days in the S&P. Look at how fast that line goes down. Consumer confidence dropped also. It's the end. It's the end. Things will never be the same. I heard that from people. People said, yep, things will never be the same. That was a great time to buy. In fact, some of our managers that are your portfolio managers use that as an opportunity to rebalance and buy more of the stocks. Great deal. That's why we have those people there, to be able to do that, to rebalance and to buy more when they think the time is right, when in fact everybody else is down and wanting to sell. So from there, you saw markets jump up. It took a year and we were up a whole bunch. And then consumer confidence once again down in 2022. Interest rates had gone up. Okay, inflation was still on people's minds, and we saw consumer confidence go down. Markets went down about 20%, but you can see consumer confidence went down a whole bunch after that. Well, great time to buy because markets rallied off of that. Where are we today with consumer confidence? Well, as you can see from the chart, consumer confidence is not euphoric. It's also not terribly pessimistic. Kind of an in between. So, is it a good time? Well, it's always a good time to add if you have money, but it is certainly not a bad time. Consumer confidence, if this is any guide for us, this is what might be a good time to add to our positions. So far, we've talked about markets and a little bit of volatility and what this year might be like. Let's just take a look at a year all the way out to 20 years. Any given time during the market as measured by the S&P, for a 1 year period, if you buy stocks, they could be down 37% and they could be up 52%, top to bottom. And if you hold those things for 20 years, statistically, you could be somewhere between 6 and 18% during that time frame. But if you have a moderate type of portfolio, a diversified portfolio of both stocks and bonds, some international, some small companies, some large companies, some growth, some value, like many of you have, yes, you don't go down as much during the downs, but you don't go up as much during the ups. Not a bad trade-off. And you can see that over that 20-year period, you still do quite well at the 5 to 15. This, folks, is the point that I make when you might look at your account and say, hey, Dave, hey, Tim, I looked at my account yesterday and how come I'm not up as much as the market went up that day? Simple. You don't have, and many of you do not have, market-based portfolios. You have portfolios that we built, that we selected to get you to where you need to get to with the least amount of bumps along the road that's possible. It is not designed to have the highest high, because if you have the highest high, that feels good in the moment. Folks, we've all known that, but hey, it's no fun when it goes the opposite direction. And if you sign up for this, you have a statistical probability that you'll get that also. So this is good. Another thing that we have talked about is the color chart. All of these different colors simply says that, yep, if you have the best thing 1 year, it's a good chance you might have the worst the next year. And if you look simply, a good example is 2021. The powder blue REITs were up there, number one, hot diggity. Okay, the next year, you were the worst performer. Emerging markets, we had the up and down. The point is, folks, you can do very, very nicely if you have that nice diversified portfolio, which is the gray with the lines through it. You're never at the top, but you're never at the bottom. And it feels pretty good to have that smooth ride. We didn't talk about this at the beginning, but I'm going to talk about this now. Last year, our strategist and projections, who was right and who was wrong, Dave? Last year, moving into 2024, every single one of the strategists that we had on our board that we talked to, okay, no one got it right across the board. Nobody in the industry got it. They had planned or predicted, forecast that returns last year for 2024 might be, the consensus was that some, with the optimistic ones, we would be up 8% or 6 to 8. Many of the strategists or many of the forecasts had 2024 being a negative year with a recession. They were wrong, just like the weatherman. But in that case, it was wrong to our favor, which was a good thing to have. Markets are impossible to forecast. They're unknowable. Now, I gave you a great deal of information about where things could go and why they might go there. That's true. But you don't know what you don't know. Again, on January 1st of 2020, nobody could spell COVID, but yet that was a major influence in what markets did that year. Here, as you can see from the chart, that everyone, it seems predominantly of all of those strategists, Oppenheimer being the most optimistic, think we're going to have a 20% year again. Hope they're right, Wells Fargo right up there as well. Average being about 11%. To the positive. We have one strategist that believes negative with a recession, which they could be the ones that are right. But as we've talked about in the past with recessions, if you recall, if we do have one, it's just like winter in Michigan. It's cold, it's ugly, it's dark, it's no fun, but they always end. And when they end, it's springtime. And then we get to start the cycle over again. So, folks, I hope all of this was helpful so far, because we do this to give people a little insight to what to do. But at the end of the day, every single one of you, we built these contingencies into your plan, and a long-term plan wins the race. How long is that race gonna need to run? This chart talks about people living longer. When I started in this business, I was doing plans for people for age 80. We're going to live to age 80. I changed that to 85, and then 90, and 95. And today, Tim and I are doing plans for people to live to age 100. Wow. Yep. Age 100. Why? Because we're seeing it with people. People are living so much longer today. And I've talked to many of you about the great age reboot and taking care of yourselves and staying healthy, because you're probably going to live longer than you thought. Well, you can see from this chart that if you're 65 today in the blue, if you're a couple, both 65, in good health, non-smoker, you have a 90% chance that one of you is going to see age 85. Wow, that's a lot. 70% chance that you'll see age 90. And even almost a 20% chance that you'll see age 100. Now, you can look at this and say, good news, bad news, I don't want to live to be age 100, and that's your call. But I've also pointed to all of you to try to talk about some of the wonderful things that we have in this economy and in the world today, and why this is the greatest time ever in history to be alive, with all of the wonderful things that are happening in this economy. Here's for your kids, folks, and that is that it's time, not money, is the greatest compounder. The earlier you can get started, the better. This chart is for the kids. Talk to your kids. Talk to them about saving and investing. Point them to us. Bring them in here to talk to Tim or myself about saving and investing, because time, not money, is the greatest compounder. And the times where pensions are gone, Social Security is going to have some challenges in the future, that your kids and all the young people in this world are going to need to have some help in planning for their future, because their pensions and Social Security may not be there to the degree that we've enjoyed them. We talked about the market and the volatility. Well, Dave, can I just time the market? You cannot time the market. Okay, no one has been able to do that. In fact, here is an example of, if you're fully invested, which is what Tim and I coach all of you to do, okay, over the last 20 years, you've 9.7%, okay, on the S&P. That's a good return. Just missed the top 10 days, that number cuts in half. Missed the top 20 days, and that's down to in half again at 2.8. I've said to all of you, the biggest nightmare in your life is inflation. The fact that inflation eats away at your purchasing power. And you need to stay at least 3 percentage points ahead of inflation to get anywhere. Okay, well, if you miss some of the markets because you're trying to time it, or somebody said, you gotta move that out and move out of the market because it's going to be bad, could hurt yourselves very badly. So again, stuff for your kids. Hopefully all of you have this message already. Those were all of our disclosures at the end. Hopefully you got a chance to read those carefully. But as always, folks, Tim and I are here. If you have questions, please give us a call. Tune into the videos. That's our way of talking to you without actually being here in front of you. And hopefully you find those helpful. And if there's something that you'd like us to talk about, please give us a call. So until next time, let's hope that this year plays out half as good as it has the last couple of years. I'll be happy, and you should be too. But who knows? We'll be there no matter what happens. Tim and I will be there with you to help you to make good choices along the way. So if you have questions, give us a call. But until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye for now.